We're on a mission from God.
Wendy? Zoey!
So I got that going for me.
Darling?
Looks like I picked the wrong week to quit sniffing glue.
Light of my life.
We enjoy your films.
I am a human being.
I thought they smelled bad on the outside.
Welcome to Vintage Video, where we're rewatching the 80s so you don't have to. We'll be reviewing every major film release of the 1980s in real time. I'm Patrick O'Reilly.
I'm Jesse Bayless.
And I'm Richard Wells.
And today marks the 40th anniversary of the release of Holy Moses! On June 13th, 1980. It was written by Guy Thomas and directed by Gary Weis and released by Columbia Pictures. The film was protested by various Orthodox Jewish groups, I guess understandably. Any movie about this period of time with these characters is going to have that. An early draft of the film was titled The Book of Herschel. This and In God We Trust were the two 1980 comedies that basically tried to write the coattails of 1979's Life of Brian.
Yeah.
And both films were critical and commercial failures.
Was it writing coattails of Life of Brian? This movie felt so much more like History of the World Part 1.
Which is after this.
Which was really weird to me because I thought for sure, I was looking it up after the fact that I'm like, this has got to be based on that.
No.
It actually has cast members in common. So they must have been even filming it right around the same time.
Maybe, what is that, 81?
It's 81, yeah. And
it's possible.
It's both got Dom DeLuise and Madeline Kahn in them.
That's true. But you can't do a Mel Brooks movie without those two. They're just required. We start the movie with lots of amazing comedian names over shots of the Southern California desert as Israel, playing Israel. Weirdly, the score is almost like horror film here as we're starting. And we see a pilgrimage tours bus that's parked on the side of the road loading up with a line of passengers on a dusty road. The door closes on the last passenger. This is Dudley Moore as Harvey. And eventually the passengers are able to get the driver to stop and let him in.
I really like the face that the driver gives him when he gets on the bus. He's like mimicking. I can't tell if he's trying to blow him a kiss or if he's just like mimicking a sad face, like, oh, so poor you. But it's just so perfectly weird.
Insulting.
Yeah.
This is a 15-day tour of the Holy Land, and Harvey takes his seat next to Zoey in the back of the bus. Harvey basically just unloads on her about a recently ended relationship with a girl who was cheating on him. The tour guide is asking people to introduce themselves so that they get to know each other better for this long, long drive. A kid in the front row here is planting a fig tree in honor of his parents. Another passenger thinks that the waters of Bethesda will cure his blindness. Dudley stands to tell the group about a mix-up at the travel agency that sent a rabbi to Paris in his place. So he's here, and the rabbi wanted to be here. They stop at their first location. I don't know what they're supposed to be seeing here, but they're stepping out of the bus onto the side of the road.
Well, it's supposedly a location where Jesus fasted.
Our next stop will be the Mount of Temptation, where Christ fasted for 40 days and 40 nights. So we're going to have lunch there, huh?
But as they're getting off the bus, Harvey snags one of the figs off of the fig tree that the kid is carrying and offers it to Zoey. And while they're talking, her hat blows away in the wind. And they climb up onto what I'm pretty sure is Vasquez Rocks. And they are trying to find this hat, but they find a cave. And inside the cave, they find this ancient vase with a scroll inside of it, which they just pull out with their bare hands and unroll on the floor of this cave. Harvey conveniently can read Aramaic because he is a language professor, and we're cutting way back in time. I'd say about 2,000 years, close to, give or take 20. A woman is putting a baby in an ark, and she pushes it down a river, but on the way it passes a slave father doing the same thing with his son, and the first baby pushes the second baby away as they are coming up on the Pharaoh's daughter who is bathing in the river. As they float past her, she grabs the first child of the two arks to raise as her own, and she names it Moses.
I didn't realize that ark was a general term for
a boat,
I guess.
Yeah.
Vessel? Because we also call it the Ark of the Covenant. So.
Oh, it's the same definition. It's just something that carries something else.
I don't know. I don't know all the definitions of ark. Apparently,
well, and you can put an ark on a ship. That's the rule. The father rushes in and he offers his slave services to protect the baby. He says he would do anything for it, like it was his own son. And then he sees the baby and he's like, "Oh, this is not."
You haven't seen another ark around here, have you?
God!
Oh, listen, it'll take a second. Same kind of ark, same colors, brown instead of white. You know what I mean? Same kind of kid too, but
God!
And he's like trying to find his own kid, and he just runs away and notices that his son has washed up further down shore next to a different family, not as high up in. They're not slaves, but they're higher caste than he is, and they have a shop where they sell idols. They carve and sell idols. And so he offers himself as a slave to this family, and Herschel goes into the idol making business. We fast forward to his adulthood where he's carving a fertility goddess with 11 breasts, I think by accident. It's supposed to have 12 maybe.
Clearly breasts, when more than 2 still have to come in even numbers, apparently.
I guess that's the rule.
No, not Total Recall totally puts that.
Come on, let's use 80s terms. Galaxina made it clear that boobs can come in 3s, just like comedy. 2 girls come in to model for Herschel. Apparently they've done this before, and when he says he doesn't have anything for them to model for, they ask if they can play the game where they dress as slaves and he dresses as the Pharaoh and they handle his scepter. And his father, who is posing as an unrelated slave in the background, is kind of disgusted by this because he doesn't want his son being corrupted like this. Zoey enters as Zerelda now. I should mention that Herschel is also Dudley Moore, who's playing Harvey, and Zerelda, who enters, is also Lorraine Newman, who is playing Zoey. So Zoey enters as Zerelda, and she's looking for a god. she's like, "Okay, well, I'm here to get a god for someone." He's like, "Oh, is this for your husband?" And she's like, No. She usually shops down at Chuck Full of Gods, but they don't have what she's looking for right now. And he mentions that they don't have the same forgiving return policy either. He offers her a god Hathor, and Zerelda wants to know what sacrifices this god takes. And so he's like, "I'm going to have to check." And then he talks to Hyssop, and he's like, Hyssop is his father, the slave. And he says, "Oh, she wants to know what sacrifices Hathor takes." And he says,
virgins. Everything on this side of the shop takes virgins unless otherwise marked.
And Zerelda's intimidated by the word virgin, it seems, and turns to leave the store because she's suddenly not interested in buying anything here. Hyssop warns Herschel on a trip into the desert that bandits will probably intercept them and steal everything that they have. And he's like, "Are you kidding? We have all these gods with us. Like, why would anybody mess with us?" Hyssop starts asking for a fancy new neck shackle, but Herschel is not willing to splurge and get him one. He's like, "Come on, all the other slaves are going to have neck shackles. I'm going to be walking around on this." And he's like, "Look, I don't have money to waste on this. What you have is fine."
Do you think I was asking for diamonds or blood?
What?
Or emeralds? Honey? It's a reflection on you, I mean, it's...
What?
that I look like this. But then as they move out of town, bandits do strike. First, we see an avalanche of rocks. And he's like, "Oh, no, it's just an avalanche. Avalanches happen." And they look up and there's bandits. And he's like, "Bandits!" And he says, "Look, we don't have anything of value. We just have idols here. So there's nothing that you'd want." And he says, "Throw down your valuables." And then his slave father says,
Does that mean me?
Hardly.
and before they can even step out of the cart, they set a circle of idols on the ground to protect them in case they're about to get murdered. One of the bandits picks one up and he says, "Oh, is this a strong god?" And he says, "Are you kidding? That's like the strongest god that there is." And he just smashes it in his hands. And so they're like, "Well, you lied to us. This is all trash, and now we have to kill you guys." And he says, "Well, shouldn't you leave at least one of us alive so that we can tell the story of how vicious you were?" And he's like, "That's a good point. I guess we'll just kill one of you." And he's like, Which one? Like, immediately, like, "Hold on, wait, I need to know this. This is very important." Hyssop is released to escape, and Herschel is tied to a stake in a fire. So They leave with him just tied up in this fire, and Hyssop comes back and he's like, "Oh my God, you're still alive. That's great. It's time to save you." And as he gets close to the fire, he's like,
This is hot. This is very hot. How can you stand it in there?
like he's just enjoying it and just hanging out. He starts spitting at the fire like he's going to put it out that way. And he's like, "You spit from that side too." But then eventually he tells Herschel to just pull the pole out of the ground and walk away from it. This pole is like a smooth cylinder and should be able to slide right out of the ropes that are binding his hands. But for no reason, he's carrying the pole around through the desert as they escape. Herschel is running a shoe shine in a new town that they head to. And when the Roman soldier looks down, he sees that Herschel has painted shoes onto him, even though he was wearing sandals, but now he has shoe polish all over his feet so that they look like he's wearing shoes. And he's like, "Oh, that's a look I saw in Carthage." And it's like, is this character supposed to be a time traveler? Because I don't know why he would do that on accident. But later he works in the palace, and he's like a housekeeper. He has like a cart that he's pushing stuff into and walking around. And there's a room with a bunch of high priests in it, and they're talking about how the Pharaoh keeps killing people. And they need a new stargazer, but they know if the person gets anything wrong, the Pharaoh's going to kill them. And they're like, "We need to find someone real stupid that's willing to do it." And then he pushes his cart into that room, and they're like, "Oh, hey, you're perfect." And then weirdly, we cut to Herschel preparing for his first orgy. Like suddenly he's high up enough that he's getting invited to orgies, but it's not like an official like Pharaoh's orgy. It's just an orgy that's happening at his house. But just as it's about to get started, Hyssop enters, and he's like applying fruits to him as perfume. Like he literally just squirts lemon all over him and then taps a grapefruit behind his ears. But Herschel gets word that he's being called away to the front before the orgy can start. Hyssop cries because he thinks that he might never see his son again. And here's where he reveals to him that he is actually Herschel's father. And to prove it, he brings out the ark that he still has, which, you know, the family hired him as a slave the day that he was found. Like, he could have just grabbed the ark then. That's not proof that you're his father, but he believes him. And
he's almost emotional, too, that his father is alive and that he can meet him.
And it seems like they're trying to play it up like a joke, like, "Oh, well, that means I'm the son of a slave." But I don't want to be a slave. I'm happy with what I'm doing right now. I don't want to like suddenly be a slave. And they try and play it up like it's a joke about how selfish he's being when his father wants him to like just be family and for them to be friendly with each other. But it doesn't come across as funny, really. The conversation that they're happening just feels like a genuine conversation between these two characters. Like, nobody would judge him for not wanting to be a slave in this moment.
Yeah, but I mean...
But they make it look like he's being selfish.
It's as equally not funny as most of these jokes have been, though.
I guess, yeah. But it just felt like they could have gone further to make it clear that he's, like, disgusted by the income group that his father belongs to.
Yeah.
Compared to where he's ended up somehow. But together they decide that they're going to burn this ark to keep the secret from the Pharaoh so that he doesn't get beheaded.
Because I guess seeing an ark would immediately mean that you were
you're a slave. Exactly.
This is clearly the ark of a slave.
Yes. A chariot races through the desert past a sign indicating that war is that way. Herschel tries to tell his ride that he has the flu and he doesn't want everyone at the front to get sick, so maybe we should turn around. I feel really bad. And when that doesn't work, he says, "Oh, you know, I just remembered I left my wallet back at the place. We should probably go back for it." And they're just not listening to him. They just take him right up to the place. Herschel meets with the young Pharaoh, and he's sitting on his throne, and the Pharaoh makes him test fruits. And he's like, "Oh, why don't you have a fruit?" And he starts to eat one. He's like, "Yeah, the food taster is unavailable," which I think means poisoned to death. And so he's like, "Why don't you just eat a couple of those fruits and let me know if you're still alive?" And he doesn't want to do it. So he's like filling his mouth with this fruit, but he's never swallowing anything. And then he gets the Pharaoh to like look away for a second so he can spit it all on the floor. But every line that the Pharaoh says here, I think, is dubbed over.
It feels like that. It's very weird.
I wonder if it's to try and match the voice later of the adult Pharaoh.
So I was confused by this. Is he supposed to be the same Pharaoh as the Pharaoh later in the movie?
I don't know. He is?
Yeah, because he'll say, is like, "I remember you, my old stargazer."
Oh, okay. Then yes. But so maybe they dubbed him over because they wanted to try and make him sound more like Richard Pryor, and the kid sounded decidedly un-Richard Pryor.
Spoiler alert.
Walking through the desert, Herschel sees a pack of Hittites, and he turns to try and warn the opposing army, the Pharaoh's army, but nobody seems to care. They're just like, yeah, no, that's why we're here. We were here to kill those people. And after a very quick battle, the Pharaoh's army has lost, and Herschel rips a piece of fabric off of one of his own soldiers to wave as a white flag, but then the rest of the army is killed. And Herschel wakes up later under a pile of arrows, somehow still alive. He's the only surviving member of this army, and just starts walking through the desert and starving to death and dying of dehydration. And as he's walking through, he crashes head on into Shadrach in the desert. This is Dom DeLuise in his third role for the year. And it's just like an awkward confrontation where they could have passed each other by, miles, but instead they just happen to literally crash into each other walking. And they're like, oh, hey, oh man, I haven't seen you in forever. Anyway, it was good to see you. We should do lunch. They just don't have anything to say, and they're not planning on teaming up to survive this. They just head off their separate directions.
And Dom DeLuise exits the picture.
Yes, he's gone forever. Everybody comes and goes in one scene, except for the two keepers. I guess three. You have the father and the two leads. Herschel comes upon a camp, and he breaks bread with Jethro.
Literally.
Yes, they're just breaking bread on a tray. And Jethro offers him one of his daughters because he has 7, and only one of them married. And she married an Egyptian named Moses with a stutter, which I liked that detail because we never hear Moses talk in the whole movie. So it would have been funny to have just a bit of that later, but it doesn't happen.
Well, Moses also historically was bad at public speaking.
Oh, okay.
So his brother...
Wait, what? Really? We know that?
Yeah. We know this.
Okay.
And so Aaron...
We also know for a fact that he parted the Red Sea.
That's right. So his brother...
I was not paying attention in religion class.
That's right.
If he had a stutter.
I don't know
if it was a stutter.
Yeah, it was a stutter.
It was probably a lisp.
But yeah.
Or just nerves. But Jethro brings all of his daughters out to dance for them, and he notices that one of them is Zerelda, and he says, "Oh, I'll marry that one if she'll have me." And as a wedding gift, Jethro offers them a tent on a slanted rock, which they could very easily have just moved this tent somewhere flat, but they leave it where it is.
But that's the piece of land that he gave them. He's like, "Here's a piece of land."
Yeah.
And it's just all slanty.
On her sister's advice, Zerelda decides she's going to impersonate a sheep on their wedding night.
It's not her sister's advice to impersonate a sheep. It's
well,
do what the sheep do.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So, misunderstanding her sister's advice, she impersonates a sheep on their wedding night. But I liked this moment. Yeah, he it doesn't slow him down at all. But I liked that she's laying on the bed waiting for him to come in, and when he throws open the tent, she accidentally slides down the bed because it's at a 45-degree grade, so she's just sliding down this hill, and then he has to climb up a rope to get into the bed and lay down next to her. But then they consummate the relationship, and the next day we see them. They've been invited to dinner with Moses, and Herschel doesn't want to go. He's like, just tell them I have a headache. It's either dinner with your father or dinner with Moses, and I can't stand these people. He gets back to his work, which is corralling all of the sheep that have strayed, and Jethro keeps yelling at him to get the sheep over the hill. So he moves over the top of the hill where he comes upon the burning bush speaking with Moses, but he overhears the conversation and thinks it's for him. And he comes back down the hill and he tells Zerelda that God spoke to him, and she's very impressed, and they decide that they're going to go on a journey to free the slaves, which is what God told Moses to do, but Herschel thinks it's his job.
And she believes him immediately.
Yes.
She's like,
she's fascinated.
God spoke to you? He's like, Did you tell him I said hi? It's like, well,
he did most of the talking.
Like, how'd you know it was God, Jethro? It was like, are you kidding me? I worked in I was in the business.
Yeah, I would recognize it. So on this journey, they come to a shallow stream, and Herschel's like, I did it. I shrunk the stream so that we could cross it. But then we see that it's just dammed upstream because these people are fishing.
This was very confusing to me because it wasn't like we saw rushing water and then
go away.
And then no water. We just come to a stream, and dried up stream bed with a bunch of fish flopping around in it.
Yeah. Herschel comes across a beggar, and he's asking for money because he is poor and he's blind and he can't walk. And Herschel says, oh, well, I can restore your vision and your ability to walk. But the guy's faking it. And so he doesn't want that. He just wants the money because that's how he makes a living. And Herschel goes to poke his eyes. And he says, what are you doing? You going to blind me? And the people around it here are like, oh, my God, he's not blind? Oh, you did it. You rescued his vision. And then he just yanks him up onto his feet. And now he's walking around. And everyone thinks that he's actually cured this person. And as a result, a group of the village people here hire Herschel to scare away a giant that's been attacking them called Amok. And there's a weird line here. I feel like it just got read wrong, where when they're describing the giant to him, the guy says, the giant is 9 cubits from crotch to foot. Mm-hmm. And then Zerelda says,
that means that he's got a 12-foot ins.
And she stops at the word inseam, where I think she should have stopped at the word 12 foot. Right? Like, wouldn't the joke have been that she was remarking on the size of something else?
I don't know. Maybe she's trying to explain what a cubit is.
Well, I don't know. But she says, well, that means he has a 12-foot inseam. And the other person says, yes, inseam. And he's like, well, how do you know his inseam? And what are you, a tailor? And he says, I'm his tailor. Like, I literally make clothes for the giant. But then he starts asking the crowd, he's like, well, how about just opening your hearts and loving this creature? Like, have you ever considered that? What has he ever done to you? And she's like,
Nothing.
Nothing.
But he squashed my grandmother once. It was horrible. She was lying on the ground. Her eyes were bulging out of it.
Like, all these people are like, I guess you're right. I mean, we really didn't give him a chance, but he has killed many of us. So Herschel heads out into the fields with a slingshot, and he throws a couple of rocks at the giant, but I think he hits him in the balls both times.
Yeah.
And he says he was aiming for his face, but instead of taking this giant out, he just pisses it off, and it completely destroys the whole village. We don't see any of this. We just see the giant getting angry and then cut to the survivors of this village destruction.
There's a lot of things that we don't see.
Yeah.
They do a lot of like, oh, there's that over there. I guess I'll go over there now off camera to this thing that I'm describing.
But, yeah, that's true. But so now they're selling him into slavery at the salt mines. And very quickly he moves his way up to the point where he's like sitting on top of the rock that people are moving because he's just a slick talker and he keeps getting promoted. But as they're moving this enormous rock, like a pyramid-sized rock, not a full pyramid, but the size of rocks that they built pyramids out of, and they accidentally drop one onto a guard's foot. And so as punishment, Herschel is thrown into just a hole in the ground, which I think is another salt mine like entrance. Like he falls into the holes of the salt mine. And when he lands in this hole, there's an angel in there with him. And he's like, I don't understand what's going on. I shouldn't be here. Like, God spoke to me. And then he recites some of what God said in an impression to God. And the angel's like, wow, you have him down. That's incredible. Like, that it just sounds like him. You should share that with more people. That's incredible. But he says, well, now, if you're an angel, like, you should help me out of here because I'm the chosen one. Like, I'm supposed to save the slaves and the people in the name of God, and he chose me for this mission. He's like, look, I can't do anything unless I have like a form and it's signed and it's got your name on it, and it's got to be from somebody like way high up. Like, it needs to be somebody important for me to get you out of here. But I don't have that, so I'm gonna go. My wings are tied, basically. So he starts to fly out of this hole, and then Herschel just grabs his legs so that he can escape. And the angel's like, what are you doing? Let go. What? Like he's the forklift driver in Hercules in New York. But when he gets up out of the hole, then Herschel just gets down and runs off. We cut to Herschel basically just jumping aboard a passing carriage of a sorceress, which the back of the carriage says Aunt Yochebel. Is that her?
I'm assuming.
Because she's only credited as sorceress, but...
And she tells him not to eat or drink anything, but he does, and nothing happens.
Yeah, there's no payoff.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, he is slightly enamored with her, and she throws him out.
He does seem like
that is all that happens.
He's slipping a little bit into his Arthur voice, so I get the impression that he's supposed to be mildly, at least, intoxicated.
Yeah, but the sign on the back was advertising that these were aphrodisiacs.
Oh, okay. I missed that.
And so when he eats the fruit and drinks the elixirs, he's enamored with her and is like, oh, the light in your hair is so beautiful. And she just tosses
kicks him out of the thing. So he just goes tumbling down this embankment Oh, but before they get separated, she does tell him that his wife has taken up with Amok, the giant. And he's like,
How much longer is it?
I don't know. You're gonna have to ask Zerelda that.
And she indicates that they're in New Sodom, which is the town that they're going to.
Right. Which this is a fictional sequel to the biblical Sodom, which was destroyed already, and it seems like they just built it right back up to get back to work. Herschel poses as a eunuch to get through the doors of New Sodom, and as he's walking through the main courtyard, he sees a puppet show with like a marionette dominatrix just whipping another character. He notices that the angel that he was in the hole with is flirting with two women, but he's wearing like a blanket over his wings so that you can't tell he's an angel.
Kind of looks like a hunchback.
Exactly. And he notices him and calls out to him and then chases him around a corner where he tries to hide in a room full of angels. And when he follows him in, they're like, who's this guy? And then he explains. So he says that he's the chosen one and that he spoke to God. Actually, you should do your impression for these guys because they'll appreciate it. And he's like, no, I'm not going to do. Look, I'm just telling you what happened. He told me I'm the chosen one. I'm supposed to save the slaves. But this meeting that they're having is about destroying New Sodom because they already destroyed Sodom and it just sprung back up. So they have to make it much worse this second time. But then a woman is knocking on the door and this is Mrs. Memnet. And she's like, hey, there's not supposed to be any women in here. There's not any women in there, right? And they're like, no, there's no women in here. And she's like, there's not any sheep in there either, right? And he's like, oh my God, this town disgusts me. So they plot the destruction of New Sodom, and they've settled on fire and brimstone because they're worried that a plague could not do the trick. The leader of the angels gives Herschel until midnight to find his wife and to escape New Sodom before they will destroy it with fire and brimstone. But she can't look back because if she looks back, she's going to turn into salt just like Lot's wife with the first Sodom. Hirsch sneaks into a party and is mistaken very quickly for a wine server at the door. Herschel encourages the crowd to change their sinful ways before the town is destroyed. He finds his wife and he gives her a little bit of shit about Amok. But she says, oh no, it was purely physical, which is not what he wanted to hear. But he gets her out of the building and then out of the town, and they're moving down the sidewalk, or they're moving down the path away from New Sodom before he even starts to tell her about the rule of not looking back and explaining it properly. So she turns and looks back and very quickly turns into a pillar of salt. But he brings it with him, so he's just carrying her around now. This seems like it would be really heavy if it was just solid salt. He sits on a rock far outside of town and just mourns the loss of his wife, who I kept thinking was like, oh, she's going to come back eventually. Like, oh, here comes the devil. He's going to make a deal with the devil and he's going to get his wife back. No, she's done. She's done for this movie.
But I do love John Ritter's devil costume.
Yes. It's just like a Walmart devil costume. It's just a leotard with horns.
It's so cheap looking.
Yeah. I did like too when he's talking about, well, I used to be an angel. I wasn't always a bad guy. We were partners before. And he's like, how did you become the devil? And he's like, well, he just sort of came out and he's like, hey, try this on. Like implying that he literally threw that costume at him and was like, hey, put this on. Okay, now you're the devil. But he sits on the rock next to him and he tells him, I don't get enough credit for the stuff I did. Like, I invented 3 of the 4 seasons. Also trees. Like, you like trees? He's like, oh yeah, trees are great. You deserve more credit for that. I'm sorry.
It's like, thank you.
Anyway, and he's like, shouldn't you be in hell? And he's like, there's a bunch of people that just got damned over there. I got to collect them. And he's like, oh, that makes sense. Okay. So the devil leaves and we cut to Herschel getting home. And Hyssop is sweeping up a plague of live frogs. This bothered me a lot. It always bothers me when they do this, where a character might be stepping on a live animal in the scene.
Well, and even if he wasn't stepping on a live animal, he's poking them with like a straw broom.
Yeah, but these are real frogs. You can see them hopping around.
Well, and they were definitely live fish in the dried up riverbed earlier, flopping around.
For some reason, I don't care about fish. That's weird.
You're weird.
I would just pick that fish up and bite its head off. That's not a problem. But these frogs, they're cute. But yeah, he's sweeping up these frogs, and Herschel walks in and he says, hey, Moses, the guy that you heard so much about, he's not the chosen one. I'm the chosen one. He's just, he's my brother-in-law. I know him. Like, we're married to sisters. And his father's like, oh my God, you're married? Like, I didn't think you were ever going to get married. He's like, oh yeah, she's right outside. Hold on, let me go get her. And so he brings in this salt pillar and sets it down. And I can't tell what Hyssop's reaction is to this salt pillar. I don't think it's clear enough, but it seems like he either just thinks his son is crazy and is disgusted by it, or he can tell what happened and that she looked back at New Sodom and was turned into a pillar, because apparently Lot's wife is famous enough that you would know what happened.
Right.
But,
I don't know. I kind of felt it was like when you meet somebody who's got a real doll for a girlfriend.
It's like Lars and the Real Girl.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he's like, you know what? Why don't we I don't want to have a daughter-in-law that got chipped, so why don't we just throw a blanket over her? And he covers her up. Herschel wants to clear up the confusion with Moses, so he heads down to speak with the Pharaoh, and they're invited in like they're at a audition for a talent show, basically. So he's backstage and he's like, what is your thing? And he's like, oh, I'm a prophet. He's like, okay, the prophet, you're up next. Why don't you come over this way? And he goes to perform for the Pharaoh. But the Pharaoh's not impressed. He's not able to do anything especially magical. The Pharaoh throws a snake on the floor, like a cane snake thing, magic. And Herschel throws his cane on the floor and it doesn't turn into a snake. And he's just like, oh, it takes a while to warm up. Everyone starts laughing at it. For a second, I thought that it was going to turn into like everyone thinks he's funny. And so he's just going to tell jokes here and like win the crowd over. But no, he's just not performing miracles. And the Pharaoh is just angry at him.
And the Pharaoh goes on and on about Moses. It's like, Moses was the real deal.
Yeah.
You see all the stuff he did?
Yeah, because Moses was like the David Blaine of this time period. The Pharaoh, basically disappointed with his magic show, orders him beheaded. And then a barbershop quartet rolls out to take the stage. Hyssop follows him out of the room with a basket that he brought to collect Herschel's head after the Pharaoh cuts it off, because he knew this was going to happen. But I skipped a point here that when he says, no, you have to let all the slaves go. God told me that he was sending me here to get you to let all the slaves go. And he's like, what are you talking about? I already did that. Like, Moses came in here and told me to do that. He's like, that already happened, but I thought I was the chosen one. And so this is his first like moment of doubt where he's realizing, oh crap, like, I guess I misunderstood something, or I'm doing something wrong. Outside of the Pharaoh's chambers, Hyssop meets the angel from before. He is a fallen angel now, and he claims that he cannot help. But Hyssop starts sobbing and talking about his son and how he misses him and he doesn't want him to die. And then the former angel of the Lord agrees to try to help. So they head to Hirsch's dungeon cell, which they can see him through the window, and they tie some rope around the prison bars, and the angel flies away holding the other side of the rope and completely tears these bars out. So it like rips basically the whole wall apart.
But it also rips his wings off.
Right. One falls off, and then after they both leave, the other one falls off. So they go to visit with Moses back near Jethro in the mountains, and Hyssop is playing with Moses' trick staff. Like, he throws it on the ground and it turns into a snake. He's like, wow, this thing is great. Like, this is wonderful. Mm-hmm. Herschel is sitting here carving the 10 Commandments, and he picks them up to deliver to Moses so that Moses can take them up to the mountain and then pretend they came directly from God.
I figured we were going to do a joke like History of the World Part 1.
Yeah, I kept thinking that, and then I was like, well, he's definitely not going to drop one of these, because they would not have done that a year later in a Mel Brooks movie if it happened here.
But I just figured that there was going to be some sort of catch, like, oh, the reason that the 10 Commandments are the way they are is because of X, Y, Z.
Right, yeah. Although they kind of get one of those in there, because Hyssop's like,
honor thy mother and father. Did you include that one? Mm-hmm. That was mine, remember? Yeah.
So he hands them off to Moses. Moses takes them up the mountain, and then back in his tent, Herschel basically relents that Moses was the chosen one. He's upset. He's like, I don't understand why this whole time I thought I was the chosen one, and it has been him. He's finally accepting it. But after he leaves the tent, his father goes up to his wife, the salt pillar statue, and he chips a little bit off into his soup to salt it, which I thought was great.
Well, there's big portions of her missing.
Yeah.
So they've clearly been doing
the first time. Herschel brings a massive idol onto the mountain to lure God down so he can have an argument with him. And immediately God destroys it and starts speaking to him. But the conversation they have here, there's not even jokes in it, really.
No.
It's just him shouting at God, why did you let me believe that? And God says, I let you believe it because you were still doing good and you were acting through me, and you made these commandments and you gave them to Moses so that he could bring them to the people. And then it seems like he screws up a line and they just left it in the movie. Did you hear this?
Which line?
Well, because at the end of this conversation, basically God goes crazy and like storms on him to prove how powerful he is, which wasn't up for debate. And then he stops the storm and he's like, yeah, that's great. And he says, I worked through you. You gave him the stones and he'll bring them to the people. And he says,
Am I going to be remembered for my participation in any of this?
And it's like, why did they, like, it would be very easy to just cut the first part of that. But he clearly cuts mid-word believe and then changes, starts the sentence over, and they left the whole thing in.
Yeah.
It just felt like
do another take.
Yeah, just do
this
another
isn't
take.
Hercules in New York. You can do more than one take.
Ridiculous. God assures him that someone will remember him eventually, but he doesn't specify who or when or where. And he also says, no more impressions of me because you don't sound like me and you're not impressing anyone. And we fade back to the present where they're just finishing reading this. Well, they're not done reading it, but they hear the horn honking and they're like, oh, well, I guess we have to go. So they take the scroll out of the cave. I thought they would put it back in the pot to take it out of the cave, but they just walk out of the cave holding it, but it completely disintegrates in a light breeze. And Harvey wonders why God would let them take it if it's just going to get destroyed. And Zoey says that God works in mysterious ways. And as they're getting onto the bus, Harvey is caught in the doors again, and God laughs at him. And that's the end of the film. Yeah, it pales in comparison to the other ones. I'm not excited for In God We Trust later this year.
Yeah.
Because I feel like it's going to be a lot like this again.
I mean, I really did just feel like it was a poor imitation of History of the World Part 1, which doesn't exist yet. So,
well, it's weird too because they must have been super nervous making that movie. If they started on it after Life of Brian, and then every movie that came out that was in that vein since then has just been a tragic misfire. Like, I wonder if he was worried, like, we need to punch this up. Like, we need to make sure that there are jokes constantly. None of this can drag.
Yeah. But History of the World is also a little different in that it covers more than one time period.
Right.
So
and it's all over the world too.
Yeah. And so like Life of Brian and this movie are very similar. They even share some of the same jokes. The beggar, the blind beggar, it was a lot like the Michael Palin's ex-leper.
Right.
He was like, "Oh, I was cured. I had a life and a trade as a leper, but then Jesus cured me and now I got nothing."
Yeah, I was especially bothered by when he gets to New Sodom and he wants to go inside and you see the guy up on the top of the wall talking down to him and they're shooting the face through, like, what are they called on the top of a castle?
The battlements? Through
the battlements. And it was just like, come on, really? You're going to use this exact shot from, like, the Monty Python stuff?
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, they did. And it just turned out that they didn't really have enough of a story there, even with this incredible cast, and a bunch of them are wasted. Like, Dom DeLuise is fine, I guess. Like, he's not as funny as he was in Last Married Couple, but he's funnier than Fatso. But Richard Pryor is terrible in this movie. He's not funny.
Yeah.
Nothing he does is funny in the whole scene.
Gregory Hines is much better in History of the World.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I was just, the whole time I was like, oh, this is sad. Like, I don't know if, like, he was, like, literally intoxicated on set, but he looks, like, sweaty and, like, angry to be there, and it doesn't feed into the character at all. It just seems like not good.
I think I would have been angry to be there too.
But everybody else is pulling their weight. Like, Dudley Moore is carrying this entire movie on his shoulders. Like, nobody else is doing anything to help him.
Yeah.
And it's not Lorraine Newman's fault either, because she's written very poorly. There's nothing for her to do, and we never get a sense of her motivations. But I love her. She's great. But I just felt like going through the credits at the beginning of this movie, we were like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And even like weird like little bits like John Ritter coming out as the devil, and it's like, this is really funny. I wish that there had been a reason for the devil to be here.
Right. There's no
It didn't factor
payoff.
into the plot at all. It was just kind of like, oh, there goes the devil. He'll say a few funny things and then he'll walk away.
And it felt like all of the funniest people just had cameo parts.
Yeah. Madeline Kahn was completely wasted. It was like Simon level tragedy of like not getting her to say anything.
Yeah.
But thank goodness for History of the World the next year.
Yes.
Because Madeline Kahn is amazing.
Yeah.
Yes.
The director here was Gary Weis, who was a longtime director of Saturday Night Live, which I think makes sense because I feel like a lot of these scenes were just directed on the fly. They were just like, here's the premise of this scene. This is going on. You're this person. You're this person. Go. And they just let them talk.
It feels like a lot of rejected Saturday Night Live sketches.
But I think there's a lot of improv going on in this movie, too. Because specifically when the angel's like, unless I have paperwork signed in front of me, like that felt like something that he would have come up with on the fly. And there's other scenes like that, too, that just felt very specifically improvised to me. But Gary Weis also plays the TV director in Manhattan, which, unless I'm confusing it with Annie Hall, is the guy who's like sitting in a room sweetening the broadcast by like turning up the laugh track. And he's just like, oh, this is great. You don't even need to make the audience laugh anymore. Like, you just plug it in wherever you want it. The writer here was Guy Thomas. He doesn't have a lot of credits that I've heard of. Dudley Moore was obviously Harvey and Herschel, and this is right between 10 and Arthur for him. So
yeah,
it's really sad, like dip in the middle.
I don't think I've seen 10.
Julie Andrews
is Bo Derek, right?
Is Bo Derek?
Yeah.
Julie Andrews, I think, is in that.
Is she in that also?
Yeah.
Well, Bo Derek is the titular 10 of the movie.
And we are both right.
Okay.
Bo Derek and Julie Andrews.
What's the premise of 10?
It's like a guy on vacation and he sees this attractive woman, and I don't remember. I haven't seen it since, we were working at Blockbuster 20 years ago.
But it's a good movie.
Yes.
Okay.
It's a very well received film.
Nominated for 2 Oscars.
What year was that?
Well, the Oscars were 1980, but it was filmed in 1979.
Okay. But he was also in the original Bedazzled.
Oh yeah, I love that one.
Yeah,
that's great.
Lorraine Newman is wonderful. She was Zoey and Zerelda here. She's a member of the original Saturday Night Live cast. She's in the Coneheads movie. She was LaWanda Dumore in Problem Child 2.
With John Ritter.
That's right. She was also Frog-Eyed Lady in Fear and Loathing. Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, of course. And she plays the First Lady in Jingle All the Way. Is she literally like the First Lady, like the president's wife? Or is she just a First Lady in a scene? I don't remember anything with the president in there, but...
I feel like that's like I was here first.
Yeah.
And then they just called her First Lady.
Yeah. James Coco was Hyssop. He's great. He actually does a really great job in this. It's him and Dudley Moore are doing all the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
But he was Milo Perrier in Murder by Death. It's a really great character who keeps getting mistaken for other nationalities and is very upset about it.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the Perot.
Yeah, it's a reference to that. He's also Sancho Panza in Man of La Mancha, which I think is another great role for him. And he was Maroni's bouncer in Johnny Dangerously. Paul Sand here was Coach Finstock in Teen Wolf 2. If you'll recall, we've mentioned Coach Finstock on the show before, but this is not the one who wrote The Great Muppet Caper or Up the Academy. That was Teen Wolf 1. This is the guy who took over the role. He played the Angel of the Lord in this film. Jack Gilford was Tailor. He played Bernie Lefkowitz in Cocoons 1 and 2. This is the guy who's the tailor for the giant. And he was Doc Danica in Catch-22 and Butterworth in Arthur 2 on the Rocks with Dudley Moore again. Dom DeLuise was Shadrach. This is his 3rd film for the year after Fatso and Last Married Couple. And he's great, but he's in it for 5 seconds and he doesn't really get any jokes. John Houseman was the Archangel. He's the leader of the angels that are plotting the destruction of New Sodom. We had him in The Fog, and you can see that episode for more credits from John Houseman. Madeline Kahn was the Sorceress. She was in Simon, and you can see more of her credits in that episode. David L. Lander was the Beggar, the guy who was pretending to be blind and couldn't walk. He was Squiggy on Laverne and Shirley, and he was Principal Squiggy in Scary Movie. And he plays Smartass in Roger Rabbit. I don't remember who Smartass would be.
I believe he is the leader of the Weasels.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, because he's got the squiggy voice.
And Richard Pryor, you probably know from Superman 3. John Ritter was the devil here. He was in...
wait.
Hold on. Is there other movies?
What other movies, Richard Pryor? Yes.
We got Stir Crazy coming up later this year. That's going to be a lot of fun. A personal favorite of mine, as far as his movies with Willy Wonka go, is the Hear No Evil, See No Evil. Mm-hmm. It's like a lot of physical comedy, but that movie kills me every time I see it. John Ritter was the devil. He was in Hero at Large, and Three's Company at the time was still running. Sam Weisman here was the talent coordinator. That's the guy who lets him know when he gets to go on stage for the Pharaoh, and he's acting like a guy at a comedy club, asking how many minutes people can do. He is a director. He directed D2, The Mighty Ducks. He directed George of the Jungle. He directed the Out of Towners remake, and he also directed Dickie Roberts, former child star. Did you ever see that?
No.
I went to an early test screener for that, but I remember it being okay.
Yeah.
But it had some legitimately funny moments, and I remember the first scene of him in his apartment. He has a regular poker night with all these other famous people who were child actors, and it was I think Screech was one of them, all sitting around the table. It was good. Hap Lawrence played the blind man on the bus. He was Sergeant Mayer in the Nude Bomb earlier this year, and he'll be back as a nudist in Loving Couples and an endocrinology fellow in Altered States at the end of the year.
Huh.
Andrea Martin was Zipporah. That was sister of Zerelda. She's an SCTV regular.
I recognized her right away.
From what? What was yours?
Well, from Hedwig.
Okay,
She's like the manager of the band from Hedwig and the Angry Inch.
She is also the voice of Queen Slug for a Butt on Earthworm Jim. I couldn't decide what credits to put in for her, so I picked the weirdest ones. But
well, she was. I mean, I think she's pretty recognizable from My Big Fat Greek Wedding as well.
That's true. That's probably one of her biggest, the thing she gets recognized from the most. Brian James was the guard at the banquet. He was Leon Kowalski in Blade Runner. He's General Monroe in The Fifth Element, and he plays Requin in Tango and Cash. And there's another 1989 film called The Horror Show that looks amazing, and I can't wait till we get to it. It's going to be a while, but...
What year?
89.
You have high ambitions, sir.
Yes. Walker Edmiston was the voice of God here. He's also the voice of Inferno on Transformers, which is just a perfect fit. They're basically the same character. He's also the voice of Harvey Gabor on Jem, which is he's the father of Jem's enemy character, the leader of the Misfits, Pizzazz, who we've already had earlier this year in Midnight Madness. She was the only girl on the blue team. He's also the radio announcer voice in Dick Tracy, the 1990 Dick Tracy. Anita Merritt was a slave girl, uncredited. I don't know which slave girl that would be, but she will be a mud wrestler in Stripes next year. So I thought it was worth bringing up. Jess, up or down?
I'm going to go down on this one. I don't think there's any reason to watch it. There's a couple of moments that are kind of funny, but really doesn't come together as a movie.
I agree. They're not all bad jokes, but there's not enough of them here to warrant sitting down and watching it.
Yeah.
So I would say down. Richard?
It's a down for me as well.
All right, let's look at some lists. Jess, where is this going on your list?
Well, it's a little bit higher than the last movie we watched, but not much. I'm putting it below Humanoids from the Deep and above Don't Answer the Phone. So it's below the Windows threshold, and in the bottom third of the movies for the year, I think.
Okay.
I am going to put this... I think I'm going to put this below Hollywood Nights.
Okay.
And which puts it above To All a Good Night.
Okay. I think this is, for me, going just above To All a Good Night and below Night of the Juggler. So right between the nights.
And mine was also between the nights.
Oh, yeah. But it is a different kind of night on one side. I think that's everything for this one. If you guys have any thoughts you'd like to share, we are Vintage Video Pod on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and Letterboxd. Or as I've said before, you can find each of our full movie rankings for the year. We can also be found at vintagevideopodcast.com. Please consider rating us on iTunes to help people find the show, please. And if you take the time to leave us a review, we will take you personally in an we will take you personally.
Oh, God.
I have a very particular set of skills, and I will take you. We will thank you personally in an upcoming episode. If you're feeling especially generous, you can support the show through patreon.com/vintagevideopodcast. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you'll join us next time when we'll be discussing Rough Cut, which IMDb describes like so. 2 sophisticated jewel thieves join forces to steal $30 million in uncut jewels. Despite a continuous exchange of quips, they eventually become romantically involved. That sounds like a spoiler. We leave you now with the trailer for Rough Cut.
Enjoy the food.
My teeth are applauding. Quite remarkable, aren't you?
Only quite.
You love Chinese food, so you buy a Chinese restaurant.
That makes sense. A good investment. You have to work very hard not to work for a living.
You don't like work.
I saw enough of it when I was a kid watching my folks.
I thought you were an orphan.
I was one of the lucky ones. I had parents. Of course, I never told them they were adopted.
You don't like being pinned down about your past, do you?
Past bores me. I'm only interested in now. Right now. What about your parents? You have the usual, one of each?
My mother was lovely. She died 5 years ago. My father, he's not quite so lovely. He's very cold, except to strangers, of course.
What's Daddy do?
He's in the government.
Oh.
High up. Very high up.
He's not the Queen, is he?